Alright, so far we've only got no viewers.
Well, yeah,
that's okay. I'm just at the Office 365 user group. So
no, not that.
Just disable the audio for the time being.
We'll have to do lunch on Friday if you're at the
That's Friday. I'm not.
Yeah, actually, I think you got music in that.
everyone else onto the 10 to 11.
I haven't even. No, I haven't done.
hello, Kirsty.
I've been also bugging it, so.
I know that there's some. I haven't watched that. One of the largest estates in the world. No. But to say that's how you're working with, I mean, that's it.
But I don't know how far you'll get down.
And Pandora, I knew you were saying their hands.
You know
About 60.
our Brennan user group is doing some work in it. Yeah. Around
No, sorry. I'm not getting that because I got it.
No, actually,
that's why our small boutique.
Well, that's right.
Okay, so we've got you as one viewer.
But I will like to.
But I'm here. I know.
Yeah.
Let me.
Yep. Is that being wasted?
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. I didn't want to sit on that.
Alright, we'll get started. We'll sort it out later. So you should see that change to a slide deck in a moment. All right, guys. If you guys want to grab a seat, we'll make a start. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for coming along tonight. I can see everyone's got beer and pizza, so we'll make a start and get going. Unusually, this month we're going to do a combined Office 365 and Azure user group. So I'm going to ramble on for a little bit at the start, and then Grant Paisley from SQL Excuse me. Hey.
The door's
Yep.
out there.
Hey, excuse me. Yep. And then Grant Paisley from Mangu Koala and SQL Server MVP is going to be talking to us about Power BI and the various services we can use for that. So before we get into what's new, we'll just talk a little bit about upcoming events in Sydney. So on June 1st, there'll be a local version of Build that'll be hosted with some of the speakers that were at Build down here in Australia to go through some of the content. It's only a day-long event, unlike the Build event hosted out in San Francisco, but if you haven't followed any of the sessions from that, or you want to find out what the news was, worth going along, you can go and register at the URL that's up there on the screen. So we'll get straight into it. So, excuse me while I walk over here, I'm just flicking the slides, so if anyone watches this later online, they can actually see what we're talking about. So the last sort of month or so has been fairly hectic in terms of changes and announcements for the Azure and Office 365 landscape with both Build and
Ignore.
hey, sorry, every man and their dog wants me. With Ignite in Chicago and Build in San Francisco the week before. We'll talk a little bit about Azure first, and then we'll talk about Office 365 second. So probably one of the bigger announcements over the last few weeks from Azure perspective is the new preview portal, which is still in preview, supports the management of classic cloud services, which has been missing until just now. The reason that's big is that it finally gives you an excuse to kind of cut over some of those management techniques that you were using the old portal and potentially PowerShell into the new portal. A little bit more around that later. Interestingly, I had a chat with the team, a couple of the guys from the team at Ignite around the preview portal. So apparently there's some work being done to improve performance on that locally in Australia. They need to push some additional resources down into the local Azure data centers to make it a little bit snappier, but that work is coming. The other announcement, and at the moment it's only via PowerShell and REST API calls, is Azure DNS. So it's the start of Microsoft's journey around providing a full Route 53 type compete inside of Azure. We already have Traffic Manager to do the lowest latency failover-based DNS routing, and the DNS service now gives you the capability to manage your own DNS domains actually up inside of Azure. At the moment, it's only available via PowerShell, but like most services, it will eventually bubble up into the graphical user interface as well. And then the last one, and it's got a really cool name, is a data lake. Anybody know what data lake is? Heard about it? Read about it? So it's basically an extension of the work that's being done around Hadoop and HDFS and the big data type area inside of Azure. And the idea is that it's this inexhaustible storage location inside of Azure where you can just keep pumping data into and then run large-scale queries across the top of it. I'm sure that there is a finite amount of storage space in Azure that you can use, but for all intents and purposes, for most people, it's infinite because you probably find the time it takes you to get the data into that environment is probably going to be slower than the time it takes Microsoft to add extra capacity. And it's really a look to the future with the impending increase in IoT and the absolute reams of data that is going to generate. And that will be useful in the longer term to be able to do statistical analysis over. So you really need to be able to build that data up in being in one place, and that's the idea behind Data Lake. Generally available, and the first one here, it's only a single statement, but it's actually a pretty significant one. Azure Resource Manager now supports the deployment of cloud services, VMs, and virtual networks, which it hasn't been able to do today. The reason that this is big is because finally now you have a direct compete to a CloudFormation type scenario inside of AWS where you can define your infrastructure build out using a JSON-based script language and then submit it into the Azure Resource Manager to actually go off and spin up those resources. It's got a lot of benefits over traditional PowerShell-based approaches because you can now do massively parallel deployments of things like virtual machines. So traditionally, if you tried to do more than a couple of VMs at once using PowerShell, it was more often than not that you'd end up with a timeout or an error somewhere in your PowerShell script. With the Resource Manager-based deployment scenario, you can now say, give me a VM of this type, I want 40 of those, submit that job, and the resource manager will go off and orchestrate the actual spin up and creation of those 40 VMs for you, and it will do them in parallel. It's also got the smarts built into it that if you write a massive long script that, I don't know, provisions say 600 various resources and you make one mistake somewhere, rather than having to delete everything and start again from scratch, you can fix your one mistake and then submit it back into the resource manager, and the orchestration engine inside the resource manager will figure out what changed and make the change for you. Now, there are obviously scenarios where that's not going to work for you because the change you make is actually going to be a breaking change to some other resource that you're deploying as part of that script. But the idea that you finally have the ability to resubmit the same script over and over and over again, and only the things that you change will actually be the things that change, is pretty significant. And there's a good very high level session at Ignite on that, so recommend worth going out and having a look at that video. We'll see a lot more in that space as well, because it's kind of going to be where the traditional service management stuff is going to convert into being all about Azure Resource Manager in future. Second one is so popular, I've got it twice in this slide, I just realised. So Media Services launched in Australia, and that only happened today. So you can now go and spin up new resource, Media Services resources in Australia East and Australia Southeast. And it's not something you've been able to do until today.
What's a media resource?
Sorry?
What is a media resource?
So it's about on-demand, video on demand, or streaming video media. So you can submit jobs for video conversion. So the Office 365 video service is built on top of Azure Media Services. So they can do content ingestion, transcoding, and on the fly re-encoding to suit the device and the bandwidth. So they can do adaptive stream as well. So it's got a lot of grunt behind it. So they've done things like run the Sochi Olympics off of it, and the last Soccer World Cup, they did a bunch of stuff out of that. So it's been around for a while. It's kind of one of those quiet services inside of Azure, but it's got a lot of potential, particularly in Australia as well. The other thing, which is networking, and a lot of people who have been looking at Azure from an infrastructure as a service perspective to replace their on-prem data center environments have been waiting for a lot of this stuff. We finally now got a far more flexible virtual networking environment where we can generate user-defined routes, so we can actually determine how our data routes around inside of our virtual networks and our subnets inside those virtual networks. And we'll actually be able to do IP forwarding, which gives us the ability to introduce third-party virtual security appliances or traffic management appliances or load balancing appliances, which we haven't been able to do until now. Effectively, you had a single virtual network interface you could put into a virtual machine, and that was pretty much it. And even when you could add two of those virtual network interface cards to a machine, you couldn't route the traffic through that machine to force your security services potentially to actually scan that traffic as it went through your network. That's now available with the combination of user-defined routes, IP forwarding, and there was a very good session in Ignite that covered off all the sort of major third-party vendors like Cisco, Fortinet, Barracuda, Kemp. I'm sure I've missed a bunch in there, but they've all done demonstrations of their virtual appliances running inside of Azure, doing things like failover and firewall and load balancing. That'll probably be in the next couple of months, and they'll be available via the Azure Marketplace. So you'll actually have to go out and buy those virtual appliances separate to your Azure subscription. But from what I can see, most of the vendors will support bring your own license. So if you're using that kit on-prem, you should be able to transfer at least part of your licensing scheme up into the cloud. And there's been some feedback about why isn't a lot of that stuff native in the Azure platform, in the same way that it's not really native inside of AWS, is that there are people who build these things better than Microsoft needs to be able to build them, and it's better that Microsoft support those people coming into their environment to support those services, because it's just they're focusing on providing the infrastructure and not actually doing that layer of servicing. Doesn't mean they won't do it in future, but it's better that you get the subject matter expert businesses in to solve those problems for you. The other one was ExpressRoute. So ExpressRoute Premium was announced. So for most people, that probably just means that they get a bunch of extra BGP routing capabilities. So if they've got highly complicated enterprise environments, they can control the routing of their data all over the place better. Plus, it's also now available globally. So if you go out and buy ExpressRoute Premium, you're now no longer constrained to it running inside of a particular geography, such as Australia. If your ExpressRoute partner offers a global service, you can now connect Azure regions regardless of where they are in the world. The obvious one item that is excluded from that is China. Everywhere else you'll be able to connect to, and Australia. If you're in the US or Europe and you don't have an Australian-based address and you haven't got access to an Australian subscription, you'll be able to do it, but you'd have to stand up a second subscription to be able to do that using an Australian-based address for billing purposes. And then VPN coexistence. So I can now stand up ExpressRoute and connect it to a virtual gateway, and I can have a failover to a VPN if I want to. That hasn't been possible until now. Bunch of small IP address enhancements, so the ability to create a reserved IP address and then move it about all over the place rather than it be stapled to one particular resource. You can now have an IP address down on individual virtual machine instances, which allows you to do things like test a machine's responses without actually having to go through the Azure load balancing infrastructure. And then finally, you can now assign multiple IP addresses to a cloud service, which means that if you want to do highly dense web hosting, you can now do that if you want to use, if you're restricted to using, rather than host headers, you're having to do IP based, so you can do secure connections down onto the host. That's now supported for you because of those multiple IP addresses. That's a lot. Doesn't seem like a lot when I put the slide together, but now I've talked about it, there's actually a lot in there. And that networking stuff is, and the resource manager stuff are the two key takeaways. And then site recovery. So working with NetApp, Microsoft delivered the ability to snapshot NetApp LUNs that you've got in your on-prem SAN environment up into a NetApp private storage environment that's co-located up in Equinix, which is right next door to the Azure ExpressRoute offering that Equinix has. So you can use it as a way to quickly move data from your on-prem SAN to a NetApp private SAN co-located near Azure, and then potentially move that data off of that co-located SAN into Azure. That's an interesting one potentially for longer-term data migration projects. And then Agility services we talked about. Office 365. So normally James will get up and talk about this, but I'm going to have a crack at it. We'll see how we go. What I've tried to do is I'm talking sort of about the core of Office 365 and then talking about each of the individual service offerings. So if anything doesn't make sense, just put your hand up and let me know, and I'll go back and cover something. Sorry?
I've already forwarded it.
Oh, okay. Good, cool. Thank you, Reed. So core services, who knows what Office Graph is? Okay, no? So a graph database is a database that, unlike a relational database model, where the relationships between objects in your database are inferred typically at runtime when you query the database, a graph database actually builds those relationships and keeps them as a first-class entity inside of the database, so that it's not having to build those relationships on the fly when you're actually requesting access to it. Obviously, the big use case with that, as we've seen with things like Facebook, is the relationships between people. And as we've seen with Dell in Office 365, the relationship between people and the objects that they create and manage inside of SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, Yammer, and all those sorts of things. So generally available now is the Graph API, which gives you access to effectively manage at a programmatic level a lot of the various objects inside of the wider Office 365 landscape. So no longer looking at things like Exchange Web Services or the link services that were available previously to do integration with. You now kind of all consume that via the Graph API. I've put groups in here as well. Has anyone heard about Office 365 groups at all? A little bit. So groups is kind of where Microsoft is pushing distribution. It's kind of 21st century distribution lists and shared mailboxes are kind of going to be driven by groups. Now, whether it makes it into the on-prem offerings that make up Office 365, I don't know, but if you are using Office 365 and some of the newer client software, so the Office 2016 preview, or you use Outlook Web Access or some of the online tools, you'll see groups gets a fairly high profile push inside of all those UIs. So if you're starting to build teams to work in, groups is going to be the way to go. It's effectively a good way to do delegated group administration without really having the old oldie-worldy Active Directory administration type perspective behind it. And then customer lockbox. Anyone heard about customer lockbox?
Sorry, groups are
Yes.
not yet transposed as Yammer.
Sorry?
The groups feature is not in Yammer as yet.
That's correct, yes. Yeah. And Yammer just moved to Microsoft's data center last weekend. Yeah, May 16, they went from wherever they were to Microsoft managed data centers, and then promptly had issues on the Monday when everybody came back to
Oh
work.
yeah, because the IP changed. That
Yes.
Yeah.
So customer lockbox is a, as you might imagine, Office 365 is a fairly big service, has a lot of features in it. From time to time, there's going to be issues that you might be having inside of your tenant that you would like Microsoft support staff to be able to help you with. Obviously, giving this amorphous group of administrators behind the scene access to your tenant on an ad hoc, unmanaged basis is not ideal, and obviously breaks a lot of the tenets around data sovereignty and privacy. The idea behind customer lockbox is that now, if you have a support incident and you would like Microsoft support's help in working through what that means for you and how it can be resolved, they have to ask you to grant them explicit access to your tenant via this customer lockbox. So it's really a piece in the armour of helping people get comfortable to put their private data into the cloud and know how it is being accessed by third parties who do not work for that organisation. So that's going to be a big one that I'm sure we'll see more of. And that kind of goes with all the data encryption at rest and data leakage protection and RMS stuff that you get along for the ride as well. New user profile page and editor. The editor is actually not here yet. It's coming to be a new online rich text end user experience editor. We'll probably see that roll out across a bunch of features inside of Office 365. Maybe OA, who knows? We'll see. SharePoint Online, so short links for documents. If you've used SharePoint Online and you have done the share with somebody and it gives you this big long URL that points to the online web app version of, say, Word, PowerPoint, or Excel, that's a nightmare if you want to post it into an email. Now you've actually got short links out of document libraries, so when you do that, it'll give you a much shorter link. It's still not that short, but it's much cleaner. Hasn't made its way into OneDrive for Business yet, but hopefully we'll see it down there as well with the work the guys are doing.
Do you know if it changes the domain? So if you have a subdomain of ABC, it's always abc.sharepoint.com.
Yeah.
Are they going to mask that with the short link?
At the moment, it's the full domain.
No, but the short link, is it going to be masking that subdomain name?
I don't know, maybe. Yeah. So all I've seen at the moment is that all they've done is they've done the standard domain with a much shorter reference link with a unique URL, unique ID on the end, which obviously determines the point to redirect to. We'll see where we go with the sort of the more bigly type short links features in that environment. I would imagine that it would be pretty easy to do. I know the Office video team are also working on a lot of that sort of stuff to enable sharing and embedding of content. It's much easier to send around a short link rather than a long link. Big one came out of Ignite, and this is now available across the board globally. It was switched on the day they announced it. There is now a new dedicated migration API for SharePoint Online. What this means is that if your organisation has gone out and bought migration tools to migrate from on-prem to online, you need to go back to your vendor and ask them to get a new version of the tool to get onto this new migration API. And the reason I say that is that the old CSOM way of doing migrations up into Office 365 and SharePoint Online won't work anymore. They were very explicit about the fact that they will be heavily throttling those CSOM API calls primarily to force people to use the dedicated migration API because it's the preferred way to do it, and it's going to result in much more reliable and speedier migrations. Good news is that all the major vendors of tools like Quest, or I should say Dell, and some of the other guys have actually already been working with Microsoft to update their tooling. What that means to you if you've got licenses to old versions of those tools, I don't know. You'll just have to talk to your account manager at the appropriate vendor to figure that out. But that one's a big one. Yes.
Sorry, just on the migration, is ExpressRoute now being included with Office 365?
We'll get to that. Okay. Jumping ahead. It's all right. It's fine.
Office 365 or supporting Office 365?
Now we're talking semantics. We'll get to it. Office Video. When Office Video first launched, you needed to have Flash Player, which obviously meant any of your non-flash capable devices were unable to play Office video. That restriction has now been removed. There's a native HTML5 player bundle. That hasn't rolled out across all tenants yet, but it is coming. Once that's done, Flash and Silverlight will only be used as fallback in the event that you've got an older browser that doesn't support HTML5 playback. I put supports Mix on the end there, so that's quite an interesting one. Has anyone here used Office Mix at all? One person, two people. Okay, so Office Mix is really cool. Who uses PowerPoint? Who has an Office 365 tenant that has video in it? Okay, so Mix is a free add-on that you can download and install that will attach to PowerPoint. It will allow you to create screencasts of your PowerPoint presentations with you talking over the top of them and publish it directly into Office 365 video. Very, very handy as a quick way to do knowledge sharing inside your organization at a click of a button. Unless you're using a dial-up connection from the middle of nowhere, in which case you're probably better off waiting. But the idea is that with this Mix add-on for PowerPoint, you can create that content on your machine and upload it directly into Office 365 video. It does a bunch of other things. That's just one of them, but I thought that was a pretty neat feature. There's going to be a lot of work in that Office 365 video space. The backlog list that the team showed at Ignite was multi-page length. Go to their user voice site if you like it, tell them what you want, and they will pay attention, I'm sure. Generally available, Office 365, probably more of an on-premises announcement. So Skype for Business 2015, which is the update to Link, is now available to download and install. There's a few gotchas with that, as some of the guys at Cloud have found, but it's there. And they're pushing out broadcast support. So you'll be able to do broadcasts of up to 10,000 users using Skype infrastructure, which is traditionally been a bit of a challenge for Link. They've done a lot of work in that with the acquisition of Skype to build that capability in. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. OneDrive for Business. So there's now some PowerShell commandlets to allow you to restrict the syncing of document libraries down onto machines that are only in domains that you have said are okay to sync down to. So stops Joe Bob Smith, who works for a competitor, coming in and plugging in a computer onto your network, somehow managing to get a OneDrive connection into their machine from your SharePoint Online world, and then syncing down the entire contents of a document library. You can now use PowerShell to actually restrict what environments that can be done for.
Is there going to be a GUI for that?
I don't know. It's PowerShell first. It'll probably come later. Who uses OneDrive for Business here at the moment? So there's actually another very good session from Ignite where the program manager for the OneDrive for Business team stood up and spoke at length about all the challenges that they know about people have been having. Who can guess how many OneDrive sync engines there have been in the past?
Countless.
It was 9 different sync engines. There was consumer, there was business for 8.1 and consumer for 8.1, there was consumer for Mac and business for Mac. It's pretty unbelievable, but they're working very hard to reduce that down into one unified syncing engine, and they've put themselves out there and said that by the end of this year, all the sorts of problems people have had with OneDrive for Business syncing will be gone, and we'll love them all again. And they won't have to say sorry at the next major conference that they get up and talk at, which is good. Outlook Web Access. So if you use Outlook Office 365, you can now save attachments directly out of that into your OneDrive for Business location, which is useful if you're on the go and you don't really have time to sit down and mess about with the attachment. You can dump it in OneDrive for Business and get to it later, which is good. Exchange Online, in the very much the same vein as the SharePoint Online migration piece. Exchange Online, Microsoft announced a Vault or an archive migration service where you'll actually be able to take PSTs of your archived mail, put them onto a disk and send them to Microsoft, and then coordinate an archive ingestion service in Exchange Online that will ingest those files out of Azure Blob Storage into your Exchange environment. If you've got the right licensing in Office 365, Exchange Online Archiving, which is effectively infinite, that's how it's sold, is free, depending on the licensing level that you've got. And then the other one is 150 megabyte mail attachments, because we all know somebody who loves to live their life inside of Exchange. I took that one out. I had a meme in there that said treats his mailbox as a file system. I'll show that at the end. No one will laugh at that point because we're all gone. That's all right. Yeah. I'll laugh on the inside. It was better. It was better with it in there. We're almost done. We're almost time to have Grant talk. Express Route for Office 365, which Reid mentioned before. I talked a little bit about it at the Azure user group. So that will be presented as an additional peer on an existing Express Route connection. So if you're consuming Azure Express Route today in your enterprise, what will happen when that's switched on through your provider is there'll be another peer that will be available to you, so you can stand up the necessary equipment or BGP routes on your end and connect your enterprise privately through to Office 365 services as advertised by Microsoft across Express Route. Initially, there are...
The only one in Australia is Equinix.
Yes, yeah. So existing Express Route providers have to get recertified in order to be able to provide Office 365 Express Route services. And as Reid said, the only business in Australia at the moment that has that is Equinix. The interesting thing is that at least initially, Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Link Online, and Azure AD Sync will be the services that will go across Office 365 Express Route when it launches. Yammer will not, and Office 2013 client click-to-run client with downloads will still go across the public internet. The longer-term plans for Express Route for Office 365 is that you'll be able to pick and choose which services you want to route across that. But at launch, it'll be restricted to sending the set of services that I just said across Express Route. The big announcement, I guess, for people in North America to start off with was that Microsoft will be reintroducing the ability to trunk telephone services into Skype for Business Online. So that's a service that's been offered before previously with Link Online, was retired for a while, never made its way outside of North America. Skype for Business, having had a chat to the team, the idea is that they will stand up US first. Obviously, it's one of the bigger markets where they can get the most traction and revenue, but they are very keen to see that come out in other markets, probably Europe second, and then Australia some ways down the list. But the expectation was that Australia, given our relatively small telco market, would probably present an easier option to stand that service up. And that's being driven somewhat by Express Route for Office 365. So if you want to do voice, you need to have quality of service on your network. Doing that over the wild internet generally doesn't result in a good outcome. Express Route being a managed service with a guaranteed service level will mean that your voice service running over that will be much better. So I don't know that we'll see that anytime before mid-2016, but we'll see where we go with that. It would be great. I know there'll be a lot of businesses that would be happy to see the end of their Link hybrid environments or their Skype for Business hybrid environments if they could get rid of them. And then just a few things on the apps. Managed Outlook apps. So if you don't know what MS is, worth going out and having a look at it. The demo that Brad Anderson did of the Managed Outlook app was pulling the Managed Outlook app down into an iPad, putting DLP over the top of that, data leakage protection, sending an email to that address. The person could read the email, they could copy the content, they could go to an unmanaged app like Twitter, and they were unable to paste that information into Twitter, therefore protecting the business's IP from leakage by stopping you from being able to copy out of one and paste into another. If that Outlook app had been unmanaged, there would have been no way to stop that. There'll be a Skype for Business managed app as well, and then the entire suite of Office apps will be subject to management via DLP, and I assume the Azure rights management service as well.
That trims the copy function, but also screenshots and things like that.
Yeah.
So you can take a screenshot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very compelling actually. There's no other player in this market that's offering that. If you've got a lot of sensitive data and you want to be able to have a mobile workforce, that's a very compelling offering that's worth looking at, particularly with the increasing number of platforms that the Office apps are available on. So there's now, I think I saw a Android mobile version, so no longer just an Android tablet version, there's now a version specifically aimed at Android mobile, smaller form factor devices. And then finally, they just announced as part of the 2016 preview program, there's the universal apps for Windows. So one app code base running on your Surface, on your desktop, on your third-party Windows tablet, or your phone. That's where they're going. I won't talk about that. Related stuff, grab bag. So Azure got a big thumbs up from Nasuni again in terms of the quality of service they provide. They beat Amazon and Google in terms of read, write, and reliability. Anyone want to know who the least reliable storage vendor was? I mean, in terms of, no, it was AWS. And to be fair to AWS, it was a very, 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 very small number, their fault rate. And I think that Nasuni said that it's like 6,500 times less likely to occur than being killed in a plane accident or something like that, which is already a very small number. So your data's safe, basically. Azure clearly wins on read out of storage. They're all about same on write in storage, but Azure's storage service, and we're talking about just basic storage here, not premium, won quite clearly out of the three vendors. Project Oxford, machine learning REST APIs. You probably saw the how old.net viral thing going around that probably insulted you when you put your photo in that told you were about 104. But that's being driven by the Project Oxford face recognition REST API. It took you guys 2 days to stand that up, which is pretty impressive. And there's some Power BI in the back end of that as well, I think, to do the analytics around people using the service. And then Graph Engine. So I talked a bit about graph databases before, but this is about building massive graphs and then being able to query them at scale. So think Facebook probably times 1 million, and that's what this is really aiming at. Any questions before we hand over to Grant to talk about Power BI?
I've changed.
It's an old picture.
Look young.
No questions? Shut up, Simon. Let Grant get on with it.
That was good.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Cool.
Okay.
I'm just gonna we'll have a bit of a technical handover. If anyone wants to grab a pizza or drinks while we do a technical handover, we'll go ahead and do that.
While we do that, why don't we move these chairs along here and move you guys in? So let's rearrange this. You're going to start standing up the back.
Where are the drinks?
Just have to
Oh, yeah.
It's quite interesting actually because I couldn't solution, so they like to do sort of professional service piece around migrating, and then there'll be a managed service around school and potentially like providing licensing because they don't have an antivirus, so it's quite nice. I mean, I don't think we've done
Questions?
Yep.
Are they,
Yeah, so Tom used to work in a reminder, right? So, he's worked with Xerox. That's like
Yeah, he's in there. Okay, cool. And how will I be then? It's another 2 weeks at the moment, is it?
That's what I'm saying.
So I just try to get price booked. I think Olga's might have already booked the hotel, I don't know.
I'll send you the extension. That confirmed. And you kind of continue to be involved in that, considering the
Yeah, well,
nature of it.
I'm happy for those 2 weeks. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to keep.
I think that was good.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to do it. Yeah, I don't think it's anything bad. Oh, okay, yeah.
Very, very focused on the minutiae. Consistently asking for time sheets. I find it yesterday and I said, where's the level of mistrust? We're looking good for time.
It's got a video. I have
Yeah, it's very good.
It has sound, doesn't it?
No.
Coordinate things.
No.
Well, there you go. You've got to take those off again. Don't come along very often.
I was technical a few years ago.
I kind of enjoy it. I enjoy understanding.
Enough to have a conversation.
All right, guys. So got our technical stuff out the way. We've got Grant's presentation up on the stream that no one is currently watching, but hopefully lots of people will watch later. But that's all good. So I'm going to hand over to Grant, who tonight's going to talk to us about Power BI. So I'm going to get out the way because I've talked enough. Thanks a lot, Grant.
No problem. All right. So where do we start? Pretty easy start. By the way, there's actually a lounge there for 2 people. So, and there's 2 chairs here. So if you guys get a sore bum up with that, come down. So I guess I've been working since about 2000 on SQL Server 2000 and got into business intelligence. Before that, I was doing Cognos consulting. You guys have used Power Play and some of those tools. Saw the Microsoft stuff, said, man, this is even better for enterprise customers. So I moved into that. Started running the SQL Server user group about 10 years ago. Was made an MVP. I went, what's that? I have no idea. And so I was a SQL MVP for that. And now that I've had it for a few years, I'm very appreciative. Obviously, we talk to the guys around it a lot and hang out with them. So I come very much from the business intelligence side, so data warehousing, reporting from that side. What we're seeing now is all of those tools, which traditionally has been SQL Server, analysis services, and those server and integration services, all of those tools there are now tools that work in parallel, which is for personal BI, which means everybody here can use those, right? And they sit inside of Excel. So tonight, I'm going to be showing you some of those tools and what you can do with them. And as I said, literally all of you can do it. So the first question is pretty easy. Who uses Excel? All right, so all right. Who's on Office Excel 2013? All right, so you've got the best version at the moment, besides the new version. We'll get to that about which are really the best versions of Excel 2013 because they do vary a little bit. And 2010? Just using that. Oh, right. Okay, you can do some of this on 2010 as well, not as capably, but you can do it. So if you've got clients that are on 2010, they can use some of these tools. So basically what I'm going to talk about tonight is I'm going to show you how to use these tools inside of Excel. And then what we'll do is we'll probably take that and push it up into something called Power BI. And it's the Power BI new experience, as opposed to Power BI old experience, which is part of Office 365. Has anyone played with Power BI and Office 365? Oh, great. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll show you a little bit. I'll be showing you the new experience stuff, not the current experience. With that, I guess, even before I start, any questions before we start? Does that sound like a plan? Cool.
What's with the beard? Is it just because Santa?
I'm basically lazy.
Okay.
This means I only have to shave once a week or so. So
That's a
actually, it started.
Holy moly.
No, it's not a week straight. Basically, I live out at Arcadia. I know where Arcadia is, near Galston, so about that way. I'm with the local RFS unit there, the Rural Fire Service, and so I spend a lot of time there. And so I was fighting the fires a couple of years ago, and then it also started then.
So they all have beards.
That's right. Just lazy around on the side. That's all there is to it. So basically, you put those things together, and you've got Power BI, and away you go. So by the end of this, you'll know exactly what all of those are. But literally, my slide deck is pretty well at an end. But what we're going to look at is Power Pivot, Power View, and Power Query, basically, and then how we can push that into a built environment. So they're the three things that we play with. Beautiful. Thank you, my invisible hand friend. Okay, so that's it. So let's actually start doing some real work, which I do occasionally. Holy dooly. Oh, wow, that's awesome. I'm seeing myself 100 times. Okay, so let's start with this. So actually, before I do that, so it's the ATM demo here. You'll notice, first of all, before we start, the size of this. So that is 240 megabytes. So just think about that when we zoom in and have a look at what that looks like. So here's Excel. You see, yeah, we can see it. Good. All right, not much to it. So at the moment, this is just Excel. So Power Pivot is like the user interface to this new engine. This new engine is it's a tabular model. It's an in-memory cube. It now sits inside of Excel. I guess you guys probably know that if you change a XLS to a .zip, has anybody ever done that? All right, a couple. All right. If you change it to .zip, all of a sudden it's actually a zip file, and you can go inside and have a look. Have a look around. Inside there will be a backup of this engine. Okay. Now this engine is when you take that engine out of Excel and put it on a server, that's called tabular, and that's part of analysis services. So where did this engine come from? Basically, the analysis services team in SQL, over in Redmond a few years back ran off and built this from scratch. Okay, in parallel to the old version, which is still around. So it's like in parallel, which is multi-dimensional. Has anyone used multi-dimensional analysis services for their clients? Got a couple there. Okay. So you know MDX and all of that, then so that's great. Excellent. Not many people do, so that's right. So basically, I created this whole new engine, and that engine now actually sits inside Excel 2013 as an add-in. And to get to it, if I can remember, I'm going to go File, Options, Add-ins, Com add-ins. Okay, so these are in here. So I click on this guy, Power Pivot for Excel. Power Map, we may, actually I'll do a demo of that. I'll show a little bit of that. It works inside of Excel. You can't publish that up onto a server. Power Query is how we get that data in. So I'll show you some of that. And Power View is a visualization tool, goes over the top. So Power BI are in essence those three things. Okay, Power Pivot, Power View, Power Query. All right, so we're going to be playing with those. Any questions so far? It's in there, away you go. What happens if you got 2010? Correct, you download it. Download the 18, go and download it, put it in here, and away you go. All right. What doesn't work in 2010?
Map.
Map does work. Bong. There's only two more, so. Okay, Power View doesn't. So yeah, you do the modeling stuff, which is probably the main thing. Okay. So this particular spreadsheet, what this is all about is ATMs and gambling, really. The Victorian government, for one of my clients, said to them, we want to know how much money individual is spending at a particular location per day. Because we're concerned that they may be going and getting lots of money out of an ATM and, I don't know, maybe gambling it, who knows. So they wanted some numbers on that. And so what we've done here is taken some data. It's 7 months of data. It's real data for 7 months for a fair significant number of the ATMs in Australia. Okay, and we brought it into Excel because we can now. So this sheet is just information about the ATMs themselves. So we've got some identifier, we've got the line type, the nature of business being the most important thing here, whether it's country or metro, things like that. It's just attributes or information about an ATM. Happy so far? And it's just in Excel and it's in a normal table. All right, you know that. So we're going to design. See, it says ATM. Now, important thing is whenever you're doing this sort of thing, always name your tables. So when you go in here and you create something as a table, you want to go in and give it a name. The reason you want to give it a name is because when you go into Power Pivot here and say, I want to add this to the data model, it's going to take the name of the table and push it into the model. Everyone with me so far?
Yes.
Okay. So I've got that bit of data. I've got a date table here. And normally those two bits of data I wouldn't have in the same spreadsheet. I'd actually pull them from somewhere else. But for the purposes here, it's in the same place. This is just a date table. So I've got a date and all the different roll-ups you have, you know, months, quarters, years, year, a month, and things like that. There's a few tricks I do as part of this. That is, for instance, I have a relative month, which it takes today and says, well, it's this month, so it's 1. And then last month will be -1, which means I can put in a filter in a report, current month equals 1, and that report I'll now have to change again.
Cool.
Okay, it just works. Pretty easy to set up. In the column here, I just say take today's date and make that work out what the month of today is. Okay, that's 1. The other one's -1. Okay, so there's some little tricks and things you can do with this, but that's the general idea. So we've got a date. So I've got a date and I've got an ATM. So the data itself, I put into a database and then pull back out of the database. So let's go to Power Pivot. So here's Power Pivot. Here's the controls for it. If I click on Manage, it opens up Power Pivot. So here it is. You can see it's just really running in parallel to Excel. So here are the two things. So it's not terribly exciting. When I click on Manage, it goes to here. When I click on Excel, it goes to there. All right, pretty straightforward. You will get confused sometimes because you'll be in this nice table here, and then you'll be in Power Pivot, and it looks like you're in Excel. Okay, but it's not. It's Power Pivot. All right, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. Here's the ATM data. So that's being pushed through. See the link there?
Yes.
Okay, that means it's pulled it out of that spreadsheet. So it's a linked table into here. All right. And you see there's our date 1 in the same way. So pretty straightforward so far. So what's the exciting thing here? I'll look at the transaction in a second. Once I brought that data in, the way I got the data in here, by the way, you see up the top here, I've got a whole lot of ways of getting the data in. I can get it from a database, from SQL Server, from Access, from Power Pivot, from other data sources, a whole bunch. SQL, Azure, Microsoft, Oracle, Teradata, all the normal things, text files, Excel, the whole lot, okay? So literally say, I want to get it from there, you set it up and you get the data, which means that in this Power Pivot environment, this model I'm building, I can get data from a website, I can get data from a file, I can get data from my corporate database, I can get file from some Azure service, make sense? And bring it all into one place as an end user. Any of you guys can do this, right? It's just Excel. Okay? Got it. All right. So let's have a look at the chart. Oh, and so that's what each of these are. So then you create a relationship. So relationships aren't terribly tough to build. You go like that and you drag it and then drop it over the top, right? That'll do a relationship. So basically my transaction has a date in it, I link it to the date. My transactions have an ATM in it, I link it to the ATMs. Pretty straightforward stuff, okay? Yes. All right, so now we've done that, let's have a look at this. So if I go to, this is now the raw data that we've pulled in from the SQL database. I would like you to note how many rows there are. 24 million, okay? There's 24 million rows in this table, so I can start scrolling through it. That says 1 million, 2 million, 3, 5, 7, 11. It's like I've got a few thousand rows in there. Why is it doing it at that speed? I've already told you that anyway. I can ask you again. How can it consume that much data and let me play with it like this? It's all in memory, thank you, yes. This has been brought into memory. Okay. One of the important things about this, well, actually, we'll go through and have a bit of a play with this. All right, so each row in this represents a day, a person, a card holder, basically, the ATM that's at, and then how many times that person went back to that machine and how much money they took out. So this person, on whatever date that is, went there once and took out $90. So you'd expect something like that, yeah? Normally, we only go in one day to an ATM once normally. Okay, so here's my first question, and I have very few gifts. I apologize. Normally I have more gifts, but there is a gift, a very, very exciting gift. It's an angry koala pen, very rare. And this is the first one. And the people that have seen this before, you probably can't remember anyway, but we'll see how we go. So the first question, how many times, 7-month period, how many times does somebody go back to the same machine? And here's your first hint. It's more than 6. Because I can see 6 on the screen. Okay, some guesses. I'm sorry? 1,000?
50.
50? 20?
95.
Sorry?
95.
95. All right, that's probably enough guesses. All right, what I'm going to do actually is sort it. So it's 24 million rows. Let's see how quickly it can sort it. Largest to smallest. Okay, let's go. No, did the wrong way around. Well done, Grant. Smallest, largest to smallest. Oh yeah, so I worked halfway down, didn't you? Thank you. Extra bonus points. Blah. Okay. One thing you notice is it actually did it instantly. All right, it's 24 million rows. That's actually now 20 was the closest. That was pretty good. So well done. Congratulations. 27 times. In fact, this person went to the same ATM 27 times at the same day and took out a total of $840. Being charged probably $2 per time. As one friend of mine said, the people that go and do gambling failed statistics at school. Maths at school. So he probably wasn't thinking what he was doing. Got another question, another pen to give out. I'm going to sort by how much somebody took out in one day. So another pen up for Grant.
5,000.
5,000? 1,000? 90,000. Sorry, anyone else over here? Any other guesses? This is one ATM on one day. One person. What's the most of money they took out?
In repetitive trips or in one?
In total.
No, in total, I could go back 3 times, 10 times, whatever, on the same day. And each time I took out some money, what's the most? 5,000. Okay, all right, we've probably got enough. Hopefully you guys have remembered what you said. Because we'll sort it. Largest to smallest. Who was there? Was it 10,000? Was anyone else close to that? You were 10? All right, 2 pens. Oh my God. Okay, $15,000. So a person went back. Ah!
Were there any
I usually
koalas
throw
harmed?
koalas, and they're softer, so
Was
that's
there any
not so
koalas harmed with making those?
bad.
Just Christians.
I actually got into trouble in the US. I was presenting over at a tech ed over there, and I'd forgotten the koalas. And I'd said, I forgot the koalas, and there was some gasps in the front of the audience. Like, oh my God, I've got groupies, people who have come to my sessions before. And I said, it's okay. And I pulled out these, I forget what they call, look like little chocolate drops. And I said, oh, they were koala droppings. And so it's not quite the same. So I'm throwing these things in the audience, and of course, they're coming out with a fair speed, and these guys are like almost killing people. So yeah, I got into trouble.
It's not the worst I've seen.
Yeah.
I used to work in a casino many years ago. Guy came in with the space of 2 days. His mortgage, lost his house, lost his car, lost everything
in
that he
2
owned,
days.
everything out of his wallet, his cards, the
Yeah.
whole lot in 2 days.
That's crazy. I just don't want to do it because I reckon I'd be susceptible to gambling. So I just don't want to go there. Okay, so what that tells us is there's some machines, and we'll have a look at which ones they are in a minute, that allow you to take large amounts of money out. In fact, they've got a limit in this case of $1,000, and this guy went back 15 times. I thought there was just a limit. You couldn't do any more than that in a day, but there are some machines where you can go back. Okay, so we learned some stuff already, haven't we? And we haven't even looked at how we can slice and dice it. This is just the raw data. Anyone happy so far? Okay, so who's used pivot tables in Excel? Okay, so about half the room. All right. So the neat thing is that for pivot tables in Excel, you basically set up a table, here's a table, and you create a pivot over the top and you start slicing and dicing. What happens here is you've now got this engine, an in-memory engine with 24 million rows in it, but the way it accesses it is still with a pivot table. So if you use pivot tables, same technique. All right, so let's have a look at that. So basically, I can create a pivot table or a pivot chart or 4 charts and etc. We'll just do a pivot table. We'll do a new worksheet. So that's thrown us back into Excel. So here we are in Excel, and here are our 3 tables, and here are our transactions. So if I click on withdrawals and just tick it, under the covers, what it did was it said, actually, I know what you don't actually want the individual values. You want a sum of the withdrawals. So it under the covers built a sum of withdrawals for me as a calculation. If you don't want the sum and you want to change that, you can. You can say I want the count or the average or max or min, etc. Okay, just normal pivot table stuff. Okay, so there's the sum. All right. So if I now look at the ATMs, remember that nature of business is one of the things we're looking at here. So there's the nature of business. If I sort that, largest to smallest, no big surprise that hotel with gaming has the highest amount overall, club with gaming, etc. With me so far? Okay. So who's used slicers in Excel? Okay, a couple of that. They are so cool. And I love watching other people do demos too, because the way I always did a slicer was I went insert, where was it? I can't even find it now, but somewhere there's where I can insert a slicer. It is under insert slicer. Here we go. Insert slicer. That's where I always did it. And then I ticked what I wanted as a slicer. Instead of doing that, what you can do is you can say, actually, you can right click on the thing you want as a slicer and just say add a slicer. So there it is, which I like much better. In fact, this, and so now that's just a slicer, so it slices the data. Okay, pretty good. So you do dates or whatever we want to do, and away we go. So we're now slicing the data nicely. Now, the number of transactions that the number of times somebody goes back in a day is actually this guy here, the number of withdrawals, agreed? So when I dragged it on, I put it in as a total. But what if I want to add it as a filter? I can actually put it into the filter area, and now I've got the number of withdrawals as a filter rather than adding it up. Even better, why don't I add it as a slicer? Add a slicer. Okay. In here under design, I can change the colors and things, but the important part here, thank you. So what has been pointed out to us, because she's been here a long time and knows about this stuff, is often you'll be sitting here and you're like, oh, I was there, and going, I want to change the number of columns. Why can't I change the number of columns? Why can't I change the number of columns? Don't you answer, you know.
It's only because I'm a trainer in it.
She's a trainer in it, awesome. Okay, let me tell you a story about ribbons. Why did they introduce ribbons in Excel and all these other tools?
Confused everybody because they kept on getting requested for new features that nobody could find in the menu system.
Oh, man, that's got to be a pen.
Oh,
So that the answer was they kept getting requests for features in Excel that already exist. Okay? Because they were buried so far down in the menu. So how does this work? This works like when I'm at home and I get up in the morning and I walk into, we've actually done some new wardrobes. I walk into the new wardrobes and I've got this automatic ribbon system. And I walk in there and whoosh, out comes this ribbon. In this case, it's got, I wonder if I should do that. I probably should, excuse me. So what you haven't noticed is I've got a slight link. So I had a fight with a,
Angry koala.
koala and not a firefight. I ride motorbikes, I ride mountain bikes, I kite surf, I do all this crazy stuff, right? And on Saturday, I was building a wall for my wife in the garden, and it was a nice bit of metal. I took out the angle grinder and I'm there and all the safety precautions. I did have glasses on, so that was good. So I'm grinding away. I had a bit of bend, so yeah, I'll just have a go. I went, boom, went straight across just there. Now, that deep, that happened on Saturday from there to there, and that said, take my pill. And my wife would be very happy with me. So I went down to the hospital. If anyone wants to see it, I actually videoed them sewing it up.
No,
I might put that on YouTube.
That's great for YouTube. I've only sent it to a few of my mountain biking friends to weird them out. So where was I? Oh, I was in the middle of this great story with this ribbon that comes out. The ribbon came out because I went into, I needed to get dressed, and so it came out with all my clothes. And on the left-hand side of the things I use, often I'm using socks and things like that. The right-hand side would be tuxedos and things like that. Okay? So left and right. All right? It only turned out because I was in my bedroom. If I go into the kitchen, which I don't go except to eat, but my wife uses this one all the time, she turns out and whoosh, out comes a ribbon with all her utensils, the things she uses the most on one side, on here, and the things she uses on this side over there. So why haven't I got slicer information here? Why can't I affect the slicer?
because you haven't selected the object.
Correct. I have not told it that I'm in the kitchen. So when I tell it I'm in the kitchen, I click on it and all of a sudden I've got the options here. This will happen all the time, particularly with pivot tables. When you're trying to add something to a pivot table, and where's all the pivot table stuff? If I click on a pivot table, there's the information about pivot tables. If I click on a slicer, we're now dealing with slicer. Okay? Whew. That's exciting. Okay, so now I have the options for this. You'll notice one of the things here is the number of columns. 1, 2, 3. So I've now got all 3 columns there. And you'll notice our friend is just there. What do you think is going to happen if I click on our friend?
Hotel with gambling.
Hotel with gambling. In fact, if I do all of those, oh, hang on a minute. Hotel with gambling, club with gambling, hotel without gambling. What the? Got another pen. Ooh, not many. Maybe I'll save it. What's happening here?
Someone's lying about not doing it.
Someone's lying about not having. I thought that too. I said my normal joke was there's a little room out the back where these guys actually play with this. No, to put you out of misery, they've got a tab. They actually have a tab there. That's not technically gaming. It is gambling, but it's not gaming. Isn't that great? So I think you probably should include that sort of information because anyway. So yeah, so that was pointed out to by one of the clients. All right, so now I've got that information. The thing that's really neat about Power Pivot is the way that you can do your own calculations. So if I jump back into Power Pivot for a minute, by going Power Pivot and then Manage, and here I am. You notice I've actually got some other calculations here. So some of them are pretty straightforward. Actually, they're all pretty straightforward. So here's the first one, which is the number of withdrawals. The number of withdrawals is just the sum of withdrawals. This language is called DAX. What they try to do with DAX is make it as close to Excel as possible. All right, so I think it's about 60 functions, and most of them correspond to Excel. In fact, they're the functions there. Okay, So you can do statistical, text, all the normal things. All right, but there's some extra ones to do with the fact that you're in a model, which you have to play with. But in essence, you can do the basic stuff. So one of those is sum, right? Just sum the column withdrawals. So that number of withdrawals, whenever you pick that, it just sums all of the withdrawals based on what you sliced by. Everyone happy? Okay. So that's an easy one. One of the things, the way this engine works is that you've got Power Pivot, the engine just here inside of Excel, and then I'm going to get some data and load it into it. What it physically does is it says, okay, I've got this bit of data, and it says ATM 1, 2, 3, 4. ATM 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, haven't seen that before. Puts ATM 1, 2, 3 over here, creates a bitmap index back into the new thing, and then it comes down, oh, ATM 1, 2, 3 already. Okay, I already know that, so I just put the bitmap index in. Then it moves on. It's doing a column at a time. Okay, so with that in mind, what do you think makes these models big or large or too large? Because the smaller the model, the faster it is. So what do you think?
Data that's
There's a hint. There's a hint in the name. It's column storage. It's number one, number of columns. Okay. One of the reasons it is so fast too is when I slice and dice the data, I'm only picking a column. Okay, like ATM, nature of business. It only goes to the nature of business bit. Because I haven't selected the other columns, it doesn't have to go there. So it's very efficient at bringing back data. Okay, it doesn't like SQL have to go to every row and then filter by that and give you just the results. Okay, what's the second thing, and actually more important than that, than the number of columns? Remember, it's going off and putting it to one side. What do you think? This is critically important and it's a mistake you make when you build these things, if you don't know better. All right, the number of unique values. If I have a column that only has 3 values in it, or the nature of business, for instance, there's 24 million rows there, right? Nature of business, how many was there? About 20 or something? It's only stored off to one side 20 unique values, and then it's got an index into that. So, and it compresses it right down. So each row in this table is just a few bytes. That represents the whole row of data because it just reaches out. So one of the rookie mistakes is when you, 2 rookie mistakes you do. One is when you bring data in, the default when you point to something is everything. You go, yeah, I want everything. I might want to use that sometime. So you bring everything in. So your product table has got 150 columns. Yeah, I'll bring 150 columns in. Way to go. So you bring 150 columns in for tables, you bring 100 columns in for ATMs, and all of a sudden you try and use a system that's impossible to use. Okay? Be very selective about what columns you bring. And also, for goodness sake, if you're bringing in the lowest level data, don't bring the unique key for that row. If you do, and I've done this, and then I took it out, it was, in that case, 80% of the storage was that for that one column, the whole queue. So my queue was a quarter of the size when I finished that. Very important. Now, sometimes you have to because it's the key and you link it in. But for instance, invoice number or some description or something that's very unique and happens a lot, are you really going to slice by it? Probably not. So don't bring it in. The other thing is, if you do want to bring it in later, you can. So with your users or with yourself, be very selective. Just pick the things you want, get the hang of it. If you want to go and get something else, you can reach out and just add it later. Okay. 15 years of doing this. That's the only main advice I've got. Which is keep it simple. All right. So we've got this calculation. So you can add to those calculations, obviously, by combining them. So I can do, for instance, divide the number of withdrawals by the number of days. Now, you can write that with withdrawals divided by days, and that'll work fine. There's 2 issues with that. What's the first issue? Well, actually, there's only one issue. You can divide by 0, and so you'll get this ugly error. And the users go, oh, look at that. So, yeah, you're dividing by 0, but they still think you made a mistake. So what you did, you go, oh, if it's 0, then blank, otherwise do the calculation. So it becomes very ugly. So they've got this function called divide, which does it for you. It's also a little bit faster. So that's the second thing. All right. So when you're doing divide, just use the divide function. All right, so that's divided the number of withdrawals by the number of days. So that gives us the withdrawals per day. Yeah. By the way, you notice the way I've named these. I tend to, with amounts, just prefix it with $1. And the reason for that is that these measures, which are the top-down measures, names have to be unique. It can't have the same name as a column. So if I've got a column called amount, then naturally I'd normally say amount for the measure, but I can't. It has to be a new name. So this is just a little way of getting around it. And also it groups of things together. There are my dollar figures, there are my counts and things like that. That long discussion about unique distinct counts is important too, because if I look at this is something you'll see a lot, which is number of customers. You notice that's a distinct count. Okay? Now, because it actually stores everything as distincts, it's pretty good at getting out a distinct count, right? Because it knows it's got them over there. So this tool or this engine is incredibly good at doing distinct counts, which is super important because depending on what I'm slicing by, I want to see how many customers I have, over a period of time or a small type or a particular product or whatever it happens to be. That'll give me the distinct number of clients, which means I can do dollars per client for anything. Okay, cool?
Yep.
That is a top-down calculation. A bottom-up calculation is where in one of these rows, say I had cost and the revenue, then I could add a new column in here and basically say that, this doesn't work, but go with me. So basically I can say this equals, because now a column, so I'm just going to make a calculation of this column. And this column is going to equal amount minus withdrawals, which makes absolutely no sense. Oof, what's it doing? Yep, it was doing it. So I think it did it. Is it doing it 24 million times? Who knows? Let's try again. Amount minus withdrawals. Calculate that for me. Now, it's doing that 24 million times, that calculation. So the bad thing is it's now going to store that number. That's bad because it's slightly bigger, etc. But it's really good because at the time I'm processing this and looking at the results, it's pre-calculated. It's already in there, it's physically in there, so it doesn't have to do this calculation 24 million times, okay? So that's a bottom-up calculation, a bad example, but if that was cost and actual, you see how you can build these things up, okay? Very good at bottom-up. You can pretty well understand that. Take this, subtract it from that, or multiply it, or divide, whatever it happens to be, look up something from over here, away you go, all right? So that's it. That's all I'm going to show you in terms of here. Now you've got these calculations, they express themselves back in the pivot table here under, here they are all just here. So instead of sum with withdrawals, I can just use the count I've got here, number of withdrawals. And in fact, what I would tend to do, in this case, withdrawals can be used as a slicer, which is why I've left it in here. But normally what I do, and see this amount, for instance, putting an amount in there, slicing by how much each makes no sense. So what you would do is back in here, under the amount column, I would say, actually, I want to hide that from the client tools because I don't want to slice by that. I want to hide it from my user. Same thing you'll notice with all the keys. You're not going to slice by a key. It makes no sense. So you just hide them. So back in Excel land, you'll see now that under transactions, there's no amount. Okay, so to get to the amount, I use the measure, the top-down measure. So if I click on it, we've now got the amount. Okay, so this is your Express modeling course.
Do we applaud yet?
What's that?
Do we applaud yet?
I don't know. You reckon you guys could pull some of this together? Okay, grab some data, throw it in Excel, pull it down, grab something somewhere else, combine it, join it together. Away you go.
So is Power Pivot a good tool if you have users that are complaining that their normal pivot tables are nice and slow?
So the question is Power Pivot a good tool if they're complaining about their pivot tables being slow? Absolutely. If nothing else, literally, you could have the spreadsheet with the table on it, don't touch it, put it over there, go to a brand new spreadsheet, point it at that one, point it at that table and suck it straight into Power Pivot. That way there's no arbitrary data. One of the reasons that you can compress it so much is it's not allowing you to change an individual row. The reason Excel takes, if you've got that same data in Excel, is because it's got to store every single cell because you might change it. In this situation, you're not changing it. You can't change anything. The only way to change it is to reload it. Now, I'm lying because if you've got the table in Excel, you can change the table in Excel and it will push through to Power Pivot. But I'd suggest to you that nearly always, unless you're doing some what-if analysis, I would keep any data out of the main model and just have just the model and some visualizations in it. Okay. Now, the other thing that goes away is VLOOKUP. Now, I never really got the hang of VLOOKUP anyway. I sort of do, but it just drives me crazy because there's no need for it anymore. The equivalent of VLOOKUP is look up the name of the ATM or something, right? You don't need to. You just bring in the ATM table, link it by the ATM, and you just put it on the screen. You don't. There's no lookup required. It knows the relationship, so you just drag it on. So another reason. Because what happens with guys with pivot tables is they want this table and this other table, and they're trying to relate it. It's just a nightmare. Just a nightmare. The other thing you do need to know about these slices, which is incredibly powerful, is that you can point it at more than one pivot table. So if I'm doing like we have, like board reports and things like that for companies, and you've got a series of clients, you can put a slicer on the first page, and in here you will notice that in the options, report connections, this is the pivot tables that this is connected to. Another good reason for naming your pivot tables. So you can see what they bloody are, right? So this particular thing is connected just to this. If I tick on that, it will be connected to both. So when I slice that, it'll slice both pivot tables. Okay, so you set up a complete set of reports, everything going, slice on the front, click on the client, it's all there. And so our customers do that. And recent one we set up, we did that, and then we created an object in PowerPoint this time. So I got that right, not Power View and Power all those other things, PowerPoint. And so PowerPoint's just there, my model's just here, my graph's just here, and the slicer, and it updated all the different graphs. And then in PowerPoint, it had embedded objects. So when I updated this, it updated all the objects in PowerPoint, and then they would say, oh, this is really interesting, this is really high or low. So they put commentary all over it and then saved it as that client's report and shot it off to the client. Pretty cool, huh? Mm-hmm. Because before, they were cutting and pasting all the paraphernalia that they were done. So these are really things you can do now. So, so covered the main features of Power Pivot. It's a tabular engine. If I take that, I can put it on a server, literally restore it, and it comes on as a thing called a tabular model. So let me draw a couple of these things. Okay, so where we've been playing? We've been playing in Excel. And inside of Excel, we had some pivot tables. And those pivot tables inside of Excel is our tabular model, which is this engine thing. Looks like that. And that's literally now all inside of Excel. So what can we do with that? Well, one of the things is, using the old experience, you can go to Office 365. I better actually bring you guys back into the fold. Go to Office 365 into a report library. Now what happens is this Excel spreadsheet goes into the library. Office 365 grabs that, literally it grabs that backup and restores it onto the server. And it puts it in something called Analysis Services Tabular SharePoint mode or something. But basically it's putting it on the server. So when a user goes into this spreadsheet and clicks on a slicer or does any of those things, in a browser, they don't even need Excel, under the covers, it's just slicing and dicing this on the server. It uses something called Excel services to do that, which is mimicking what's happening in here. Okay? All right. The new experience, similar concept. You push this up into Power BI. and basically grab it into that. And it, again, grabs that, puts the information on here. The way you can refresh is that the bit I'm about to show you is there's another part of this called Power Query. The Power Query also gets pushed up to here, which means you can refresh the data from here. You don't have to keep pushing, updating the data here and then pushing it back up. All right? You set up the Power Query here, you set up the credentials to reach back, and you refresh it nightly. So away it goes. It picks up the Power View reports and puts it up there, and the Power Pivot thing goes in. So what I'll do next, I can show you a little bit of that, or I can show you this first. Who wants to see Power Query first? This is pretty cool. All right.
Just a couple of points.
Yes.
While you're setting that up, a couple of things you need to be aware of. If you've used one and go to two, you have to have a synced ACL from on-premise to Power BI because it uses ACL security. And the other one is if you use, for connections, you can also use analysis services. And prior to that, you used to use the data warehouse connector. That's now defunct.
Okay. So there's certainly some things around this. The way this happens, if you want to set this up right now, you can literally with your Office 365, you go to app.powerbi.com, put in your Office 365 credentials, and it'll spin up. And I'll show you that. I'll show you that running. Okay, and you get a sample site, everything's running out of the box. So what this needs at the moment is Office 365. The only reason it needs Office 365 is it needs the Azure Active Directory. That's correct. That's the only reason it needs that. Okay, so down the track, you won't have to do that. You can just set it up on Azure Active Directory and away you go. Okay, so they're separating the Power BI stuff from Office 365.
If you've had a look at it recently, the pricing on it has dropped unbelievably.
So the pricing is $9 per month US.
Per user.
Per user.
Used to be what, 70?
Oh, something ridiculous. $60 or $70 per month per user. So it's dropped to $9 US per user. If you don't have Office 365, it's another $9 US. So that's $20 US per month. It hasn't been released yet, so it's preview, but they're saying it's going to be comparable to the US prices, so it's going to be about what it is.
And it's not part of your E3 subscription. It's totally separate.
Somebody here remind me about DataZen before I finish, because Microsoft bought a company called DataZen 2 weeks ago. It's another visualization thing, and I need to show you where that fits in. Here's DataZen. Okay.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. It's pretty cool. There you go. I feel like it's like those TV things. Coming up. Here we go. All right. Any questions about Power Pivot? So that's the main engine thing. All right. Now what we're going to do is go look at Power Query, which is another one here. And the beauty of Power Query is it gives you the ability to grab data from other places instead of like we did back in Power Pivot, reaching out straight from here and grabbing data. We're actually going to grab the data via Power Query. It's going to wind up in the same place, but there's some advantages to doing that, and that's what I want to show you. Okay, so here we go. This is going to be exciting stuff. Oh, hang on, let me just click on a couple of things first. Pivot, Power View. Oh, so I'll cover Power View very quickly. So Power View is the new visualization tool, which is part of Excel 2013. When it goes up into a Power BI site, it's the reports. The reports layer is Power BI. So if I publish this as it is into Power BI, just here, this report will show up exactly how it is there. Let me rephrase that. It'll show up almost exactly like that. Okay. There are some rendering differences where it doesn't quite line up and things like that. So be aware that when you publish things, it may not turn out exactly the same, but it's close. In fact, my recommendation would be not to do the Power View reports in Excel, but just to do it in Power BI. There's some extra visualizations you can do, and also you're now doing it on the canvas, so it's easy. And I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, so to get these visualizations on here, it's as simple as, let me click on one to show you. So at the moment, this all I did was drag dollars per customer into values, and the axis is days of the week. So literally, it's just a case of dropping in what you want into these wells, and you've got a thing ready to go. So, and the good thing about these is they interact with each other. So if I click on financial institution, then you'll see that the financial institution on the days of the week, on average, is much higher than these other guys. And then this is for financial institutions. This is the how much per customer, per whatever it is. Hang on. Actually, I'll click on it and it'll tell me. Dollar per customer. Okay. Hotel or gambling, again. Gentlemen's Club, there's an interesting one. So I think we can work out the price of a cigar here somewhere. But anyway. The other thing here is, what's really neat is you do have this style, which is a scatter graph, and literally each of these represent, that's $1 per customer, $175 per day for million, etc. And what you can do with these is you can animate them over time. So you can see how things are changing over time. And in fact, if we can pause them, if you click on one of these, it actually shows you the path where that's actually gone. Okay. So has everyone seen the Hans Rosling series? Okay, do yourself a favor, look up Hans Rosling and TED, T-E-D, okay? The best example of this is where this came from. And what he did was, it was death, a number of kids, I think, and GD, and the bubbles, the size, you can, by the way, see on the right here, I've got X and Y, I've got the size of the bubble, I've got the details that I want to show, and I've got the color. So you've got all of these controls. So I think there's about 5 or 6 different measures you can put into this to get some sort of relationship. But literally, what he does is he's got countries flying all over the place, and he's saying, oh, this is when this happened, there's a big war here, and it tells you all the relationships, and everything sort of moves to one place. It's very cool. Definitely look that one up. So this is the visualization that he used, and that's available to you to do on these sort of things. Any questions? That was a very quick overview of Power View. The Power View is how you look at the data in the pivot table, and Power View and Power Pivot is the guts of this. Okay, so how do we get the data in there? Power Query. Am I going for time? You guys all having a good time? All right, I'm going to start with a completely, no, I'm not. Let's go start with a completely blank database. I guess blank spreadsheet. I'm going to start with an almost blank spreadsheet. This has nothing in it. Let me prove that if I go into Power Pivot. So there's nothing up my sleeve. Okay. Everyone, I feel like it's some magic trick. There's nothing here, right? Gone into Power Pivot, it's empty. All right, nothing to see here, no joints here. All right, so Power Query. So what have I done here? I've got a link. So let's copy that link for a second. Let's go into our browser of choice, which is normally Chrome, by the way, but anyway. All right, so parliamentary expenditure, poly perks, I call it. If we scroll down, we got some tables here. These tables have the name of the politician, where they're from, and what money they got for travel allowance overseas, all sorts of stuff, including, I think, family travel or something. I don't know. It's pretty impressive what you can get. Everyone happy? It's just a table. It's available to us. Right. So let's go back. So here are in here. Here's Power Query. You can pull from even more data sources than from the underlying Power Pivot environment. Azure data sources, marketplace, blob storage, from all sorts of databases, directly from SQL Server, from IBM, PostgreSQL, Teradata, all different files, XML, text folders, etc. In fact, you can even do an online search. You can say, and so this is one of my other demos. So I can say top 10 models. Oh, there you go, Judges of Miss America. I will do. All right, so that's actually gone off to the website, had a look what's on there. It's actually found a table for us to look. So I can click on that and it'll actually suck it in. Right? Very important data. You guys may want to look into that. So I copied that, as you saw. So we're going to do this. We're going to go to Power Query, and we're going to go from the web. Okay, pasted that in. Okay. So it's going to that website now, and it's inspecting to see what's on that web page. And it found some tables. All right. So if I click on one of these tables, I can see the content. Okay. So let's do table 1. I think that's New South Wales, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's some New South Wales polys there. Let's edit that. Okay, so in the same way that Power Pivot sits in parallel, this actually sits in parallel to Excel. All right, so we've actually gone off to this sister program, if you like, which is Power Query. Now, somebody asked whether I knew R. I don't. I haven't really played with R, but this is M. The language used here is M. So there you go, not C# or C or any of those, it's M. That's the language used here. But you don't need to know M to use this tool. So let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is, why has that got the, I could happily pick the name of the column and then not that. Interesting. Anyway, it's worked out the name of the column, so I'm happy with that. I just got to delete that row. Actually, no, I'm going to start. Just good with that. Keep rows, remove rows, remove top rows. Okay, I'm going to remove the top rows and I'm going to remove one row because the top row there is actually the name of the column. We already have that, I already seem to know that. So that's the first thing I've done. Now this is important. How often have you tried to bring in data? Oh, by the way, if someone has to, you're heading off, or you need to look. There's great. Look, I'm going to draw attention to you. Go and sit over there. I'm not. You're holding everybody. I'm not going to speak again until you go and sit down there.
There's a door.
There, just there. It's comfy. He doesn't bite. Come on. Go on. I'm not the only one getting embarrassed here. Come on. We're awake. Yeah, go on. Thank you. Makes me feel better. All right. How often do you have some data which is in this format? I've got some data. In this case, I've got names. And then the bastards have put July, August, September, October as columns. And I want to bring that in. And it's just, oh, no, how am I going to do this? Okay. And it's never easy. In fact, the way that we've tended to do it is actually put it in a pivot table and pivot in a pivot table. Yeah, he's nodding. Okay. Power Query, you don't have to. There's a tool for doing it. So literally, and they improved it recently, before you would highlight the columns that you want to unpivot, like that, and go unpivot. But the new version, later release, now says, and every month, by the way, they keep releasing changes. If I click on the first 2 columns of data, and under transform, go unpivot. Ah, damn it. Now, this is cool. I just undo that. To undo it, I just click on the cross. Okay, it's done. I mean, undone. All right, let's go back. That and that. And I want to unpivot the columns, and I want to unpivot other columns. So do the ones. Okay, now that means if they think up some new costs that they want to bring in, they'll just come in. Okay. All right, look at that. It's now pivoted all of that data. The name, the home base, what the attribute was, you know, the perk, what the perk was, and the value. So let's call that perk. And let's call this amount. Okay, what else have we done? Because it was twisting the data down, a lot of the times these guys didn't actually get a perk for that particular row. So there's no point in really bringing it in. You can, it doesn't make any difference, but let's not bring in those rows. But the beauty is this is literally, if you point to some data source, you can start filtering. I want this, I don't want that, etc. Also, there's lots of things you can do. You can split columns, split on space, split on commas, do all of that sort of thing, right? And just create extra columns as you go. You can remove columns. So this is a full, not full, actually it's pretty full, ETL. extract, transform, load, which is a tool that you use integration services for, and you have a propeller on your head, and I don't do it because I hate it. So the others do it, the other boys in my team do it, but I do use this. Now, you'll notice that as I play with the data, it's creating the steps as I go. If I go back to one of those steps, I can just go back and have a look. And in fact, you can even delete a step halfway through it. Just click, oh, I don't want that step. Now, sometimes it'll blow it up because you actually got things dependent on it, but in essence, you can do that. And in fact, that whole script under Advanced Editor, that's the script for the whole thing. And if you go in and have a look at it, this is M. It's actually not that scary. Rename columns. Name of the column you want to rename, what you're naming to. I could probably get the hang of that. I could probably type a few of those in, etc. Okay. Also notice at the top here, it says data source equals 1. I can go and change that to 0, and it'll bring in the first table. So all the script is exactly the same. I just change it so I actually want to get the second one. All right. And later what you can do is you can set up a loop. Yes, you set up a loop and say loop through from 1 to 5 and get this data. What you can do in Power Query is, this is a query. This query is getting this data. You can pass in a parameter, which is that number there. I haven't done this, we haven't got around to it. And what I started to do is I created an Excel spreadsheet that had 1, 2, 3, 4, and it said New South Wales, Queensland in that, and I loaded that as a query. I loaded this as a query with a parameter in it, and then I inject the number I want, and I know it's New South Wales. So these queries you can combine. You can either union them or you can join them. It's absolutely infinite what you can do. If you want to learn about it, go to Chris Webb, a friend of mine, he's in England. He does just this stuff. There's all sorts of things you can do. Even writes back to the databases and things. It's crazy, crazy stuff. Okay, happy? All right, so this is Power Query. It's just text. You can have a look and see what it's doing. So now, I'm going to cancel that. So we've done all of these steps. We're very happy with that. Important to give it a name. Perks, why not? I'm happy with that. Actually, I would have cleaned up the names of the columns and things as well. I haven't in this case, but that's probably enough. Okay, now where you go here and go close and load to, you can load it into a table in Excel. But you guys are never going to load it into tables again, are you? No, Grant. We're never going to load it into tables. We're always going to put it into Power Pivot. Yes, perfect. So I'm going to create a connection, and I'm going to add this data to the data model. Okay, so make sure you click on that bit. And then I click load. Now, you'll see over on the right here, it's got a little spinny. In fact, it's finished already. Stupid machine. Electronic mouse. Okay, so it loaded. What it did just then is literally it went out to the website, grabbed the data, and brought it in. That tool only brings in a sample of the data. So you can point that at 24 million rows, and it'll just bring in the first, I think, 1,000 or something. And then you can do your things, and then away you come back. In fact, one of the things it does, if you do the drop down for a filter, it'll say, oh, by the way, there's some more values. And you go, okay, can I see them? And then it'll actually go out and rip through and find that value for you. Okay, so where is it? It's in Power Pivot, right? There's Power Pivot, going to manage, and all things, we've now got perks. See, there's data in there now. This is the magic trick, right? Okay, so it's now pulled that into, if they change the data in there and I refresh that, it'll actually refresh the data. All right, so I've now pulled data over the web, and here it is. If I create a pivot table out of that, all the normal stuff, new worksheet, there's a pivot table. Let's look at the perf amount. So we've got to add that up. That's great, except to put it as that. So what have I done wrong here? It's only counting it. So what you need to do is back in here. So actually, that is not text. Obviously, it's a decimal number or text. Now it's got an error. Damn it. I'm not going to go into it and fix it, but what it has in here is one of these has a bloody B in it. Oh, A, B, C, D. Of course it does. I've never ever seen data that had different data in the column. If you guys, never happens, never happens. So I could go back and filter that out back in Power Query, and then I'd convert that to a number, and then I'll be able to slice and dice it. Okay. So maybe I've done that already. Let's have a look. Is it 2? Yeah, let's see what 2 looks like. Looks very similar to 1. Let's have a look. Oh, it's a number now. Yeah, okay, so that one's right. Same concept, there it is. Click on the pivot table, new worksheet. There's the perp. It's still called value, I didn't rename it in this case. And then I can go to the people, I can sort largest to smallest. So Mr. Abbott spent the most. Oh, what a surprise. And if I click on the perp, add that as a slicer. There's our slices. By the way, I love changing the colors of these. This is my favorite. This is my favorite. And car costs, Tony. Charter. Ooh, not Tony. Honorary Barbara choice.
Busy chasing dogs.
Yeah. Overseas travel. That's got to be Tony. And Roman. There you go. All right. So that data, now I've got it here. If I go into this guy here and I go at .powerbi.com. Right. When you start your preview, this is what you will see. You will see a dashboard all up and ready to go. It's a sample dashboard. You'll see this is the dashboard part. If I click, I go, oh man, what's happening with this year to last year's sales? If I click on it, that dashboard goes through to the report. What sort of report is this?
Power View.
Power View. It's a Power View report. Okay? Power View report. Look. Edit report. This is a bad example because, well, actually, it's going to let me. I can edit this report. Here, the fields just the same as you've seen inside of Excel. This is just the Power Pivot model. I can create visualizations. I can do the whole lot and save it. And the end user can do this. They don't need Excel. They don't need anything. They just need access. They have to be on your domain. You have to be part of your domain. Okay? And then away they go. Click, click. Thank you. You see there's a couple of pages of this visualization. You know, it's got maps. The nice thing about maps is you don't actually have to have long and Latin information for maps. Literally, if you've got a state and a name of a town, Bing, it looks it up on Bing and says, oh, I know where that is, and then actually plots the data for you. So you can straight away, you can do all of this stuff. We used it for that ATM demonstration. We took the locations of their ATMs and the competitor ATMs, because that's available, obviously. And then we took a layer and put on the location of clubs, because clubs is where the money is in the ATM business. And so they were looking at the relationship between those those things on a map, and they could zoom in and have a look around. Okay. As I said before, all these are interactive. So if I click on one of those, you start seeing the relationship between the other things. There's also, who's heard of Q&A? Q&A, all right. So
I'd have to say that was the one thing that sold it for the business, Q&A.
Okay.
For us,
So
we had there was a comparison between that and Tableau, and that was one of the key sellers.
okay, so one of the key sellers is that. So let's have a look at what that is. So I'm going to click back on the main dashboard. Oh, by the way, no, I'm not. I'll go back to this sample. So I didn't show you something. When you're in here, the way you get something into the dashboard is, oops, something went wrong. Awesome. Is when I'm in edit, actually it shouldn't even be in edit. It's not letting me. Damn it.
It is still in preview.
No, that's not the issue. I think because this is a read-only environment, it's not letting you. But what happens is when you hover over one of these visualizations, you get a little pin. Click on the pin, puts it in the dashboard. And in fact, just to show you I'm not lying, polyperk. From there. Oh, okay. I'm going digressing. Go back to what we were. Let's go back to here. Okay, we were talking about Q&A. I got distracted. Let's type a question. Value, car costs. Okay, so what's happening? while I'm typing, it is interpreting what I'm saying. It says show perks named car costs and their value is how it interpreted what I started typing there. So I say value car costs by name, maybe. Okay, so there we go. And then you can do sorted by name. I actually got to say sorted by, I don't know, sorted by the money or whatever it happens to be. As you're typing, literally it's interpreting what you've got here and displaying information. All right. And what we've found already, some of the people that have started using this already, this is how they do it. They don't go in and build a report. They literally start typing in their questions, get what they want, and then pin it to their dashboard. Pin, poof. Okay, in fact, I'll do it. Pin, poof. See, pin, poof. So,
Is that the sound effect?
yeah, look, there it is. How cool is that? And actually, I want to see it just that. Yeah, pull, biff, there it is. And it keeps moving around to where you want it. So that's the sort of relationship between the dashboards and the reports themselves. So that's Power BI up here. $9 a month per user. Questions? So we covered Power Query, we created something, we pushed it up, we're now consuming it.
There's a free version of it as well.
There's a free version of Power BI. I think there's a limit to the size of the things you can push up there. It's not free yet. Well, actually, everything's free at the moment. It's a preview, so you get the whole lot at the moment. But when it releases for real, it'll be $9 a month per user. An extra $9 if you don't have an Office 365 subscription, but there will be a personal version which you can use for yourself. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, though. I don't think you can share it with anyone.
No, you can't. It's uploaded.
So I'm not quite sure how that's going to help you. There is a plus and a minus to one of these things. What's the issue of me publishing this up, what I've done here? What's the thing that's a bit of a worry? Why are people concerned about doing this, particularly in Australia?
Sovereignty.
Sovereignty. Okay. When I push the polyperk data up, polyperk's okay, it's already in the cloud, so we're good. But if I've got my corporate data and I'm now pushing that in an Excel model, basically this model up onto here, that's now actually in the cloud. It's still part of my domain.
You wouldn't be doing that.
What? Yeah. That model can go up to there and I can share it within my domain. However, the data is really there. It's sitting in the data center. All right. Now, one of the things I recently did in here is I gave you another option. I can put this model on a server on premise, so here to here, and I can point this to that. My users get all this great stuff. I can build the reports and all those things, and I can create my dashboards. The data never leaves here. Literally all it is just a front-end tool going into there. However, what can't you do?
Q&A.
Q&A. You cannot do Q&A. Why can't you do Q&A?
Because it can't crunch it fast enough.
Because it doesn't
Can't
have the
crunch
data
it.
to crunch it.
It doesn't have the data to crunch it. So what this Q&A does, when you first load up this spreadsheet, you won't be able to do Q&A. You've got to wait a while. Because literally it's looking at everything inside your model and going, okay, they're the people. Okay, I've got so honourable human. Okay, I've got that. All right, that's moving. Putting all the data in. And then when you type it in, it knows what to do. Okay? Well, that data isn't on here for it to do that.
Yeah.
It's sitting on premise, on your premise. So I can't actually do it. So unfortunately, you don't get Q&A. You do get everything else.
Is there a plan to bring that feature on premises?
With 20
It's probably a plan. I don't know where it lives. I honestly don't know where it's at.
That's a major killer for me.
It's not good.
If you're betting on on-prem, you're probably doing it wrong.
Of course. That's not my problem, that's his problem.
That's been a long time. I can do a Power Map demo, but otherwise, I don't
Does
think
anyone
there's
want to see
anything else.
Power Map demo?
How excited are you? It's me mountain biking.
I'm
It's
so
cool.
excited, I don't know how to sleep.
I think we might call it. We might call it.
Yeah, look, I'd rather leave it there.
Yeah.
I can always come back sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
You never know. With Summit. Oh, so who didn't remind me about data then? All of you didn't remind me about data
The
then.
one other thing you didn't cover is the difference between Office 365 on-prem and Office Pro Plus and 365.
Yes,
They
thank
do
you.
the differences.
Okay, so I don't know the differences of the.
It's just the updating you're talking about.
Okay, so this Power BI, let me cover what's happening with. So as I've discussed, Power BI is a series of technologies: Power View, Power Pivot, and Power Query. And when they sit inside of Excel, it's in Office 2013. It has to be a certain version. I don't know off the top of my head what they are, but they're like the advanced versions. And the other thing is, if you're doing the Office 365 version, you get better versions of those three things. They get updated all the time. Right. If you're doing the like just on-premise, they're a bit old because they're tied up with a normal Office update. So you don't get quite as many features. Okay. Literally, the Power Query stuff is rolling out every month. It changes. All right. So that's where that fits in. What else do you need to know about that? That's it, I think. Yeah, that's it. There is another tool, actually that's effective. There is a tool that you can build called Power Designer tool, which you can download, which is completely independent of Excel, and you can build the model and the views and publish them.
But no natural language.
No, still no natural language. The reason they've done it, by the way, is because there's a lot of people caught up on old versions of Office, and they want to use this. So that allows them to do it. But the preferred would still be inside of Excel. Okay, so that's sort of the general idea. So DataZen is a program that you can download as a store app. So that's what we were looking at here. Okay, if I click on one of these tiles, it actually shows me information about that. Actually, there's no comments in here. And basically, you can comment on it, and so you get, oh, there we go. Okay, so this is a good one. The total number of incidents, well, there are these particular product lines that these incidents took place in, and there's a commentary about how that goes. But this was some stupid amount of money per person. It was huge, right? And it's now free if you've got Enterprise or maybe BI version of SQL, certainly Enterprise. Is it BI as well? Don't know, but certainly Enterprise. So if you've got an Enterprise version of SQL, you can have this. Literally, you publish the DataZen server on your server with the data. It's not trivial to set up the queries because you either have to write MDX or DAX or SQL to actually get together the data. You get the data and then you build these visualizations on top. It's the tough part to get the data together. But if you've got reports already, you can probably copy and paste that sort of data. So it's not so bad. And then a user uses either this or...
Is that an iPhone? You got an iPhone?
No.
Oh.
Or an iPhone 6. And away they go. You know, they biff on something. There's the comments. I can comment on a whole lot. So they have released an app directly for all of these things. So it's pretty compelling. So if probably most of you either work for or working for organizations that have an enterprise version, you can do that. That's, as of 2 weeks ago, they bought that company. So we've got more than enough front-end tools. So SQL's been, Microsoft's always been good for the back end. They've brought that through this Power Pivot to make it available for all you guys. And away you go. Last thing, Power Query. One of the drop-down things I didn't show you, you can point at folders. You can point at the folder on your laptop and go, get it. And it'll go through and get every file, not the physical file, the name of the file and the information about the file and load it into Power Pivot. So you can actually look and see exactly what's going on. It's very cool. Very, very cool. Particularly if you're trying to find some space on your laptop. So anybody can do at least that one. Okay, try that one at home. At least that. So that's it. Great. So I'm going to talk all night otherwise. Obviously my email's grant@com, so contact.com.au. So if you want to talk to you about anything, feel free. But thanks for your time and yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Grant. Look, we'll wrap it there. Thanks a lot for coming in this evening, Grant, to talk to us. Please come and grab Grant if you want to talk to him more about this or other things. Appreciate his time this evening to come and talk to us about that. We'll be back in June at some point. There'll probably be a split O365 Azure user group next month. We'll see how we go. Thanks a lot for coming. If you want to hang around, we'll be here for questions afterwards. Otherwise, we'll wrap it there and let everyone get on with their evenings. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.